Last Sunday, I talked about the concept of incarnation, the idea that the divine is in all of creation, and that we need to work to see the divine in all things, to see creation as thou, the other connected to the sacred or to God as you are, rather than seeing the other as an object. Today, my second sermon in my Christmas theme series, I want to look at the concept of the mystical, which is an element of this season. When I was young, I wanted to be a mystic. You know, be able to have a vision and to levitate, or to be able to be bilocational on demand. That's what I thought it was to be a mystic. I wasn't into doing things like saving the world from bad people or interdimensional creatures like the mystics, quote unquote, mystics of the Marvel or DC comic world. I just wanted to have extraordinary experiences. I didn't know then that these kinds of phenomena have little to do with the essence of mysticism. So, if it's not levitation or bilocation astral projection, then what is mysticism? Mysticism may be actually one of the greatest misunderstood terms in our language. Many people confuse the concept of mystic with the notions of the occult, fortune-telling, Ouija boards, palm reading, crystal balls and tea leaves, communicating with the spirits or angels. But that is not what mysticism is, or what mystics are all about. Mysticism merely means the desire to directly see or know the essence of the ultimate reality, the elemental, the undistilled core of the universe's ontological beauty that connects all of existence. In you speak, to know the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Mystics are everyday people. Everyday people who are seeking or at least open to experiencing a closer connection with the ultimate reality or the divine aspect of creation, or with God, if you are comfortable using that term. A mystic state is a feeling of connection to something vastly greater than oneself. And it's not just seeking knowledge about the ultimate reality or more knowledge about God, but in some way experiencing it. People have wanted to enter into the mystic realm or mystic state from the most ancient of times and in all cultures. Anthropologists have found that being comfortable with and expecting mystical connections were an integral part of the world's prehistoric hunters' cultures. Mysticism was a part of the Indian Vedic religious practices as early as 1500 before the Common Era. Mysticism was a significant aspect of ancient Chinese Tao tradition. The Tao is understood as unnameable and ineffable, yet is present in and in all things. Ancient Greeks had a mystical element to their philosophical and religious practices, going back to the 7th century before the Common Era. In the early centuries of the Common Era, mysticism developed within Judaism with the Merkava, the contemplation of the divine throne or chariot, the Merkava, seen in a vision by Ezekiel, which then developed into the Kabbalah mysticism tradition in the 12th century in Spain. Christian mysticism developed out of the Desert Fathers and Mothers, the ascetic women and men who went into the Egyptian desert to live a monastic life of prayer in an attempt to come closer to God. And mysticism exists in our parent faith traditions. The Universalists accepted mystical experience, which then became part of their theology. Jane Lead, who founded a Society of Universalists in the 17th century London, described in her book, An Enochian Walks with God, her mystical experiences that reveal to her that divine punishment is for reforming and that all are reconciled with God in the end. George de Benneville, the physician and 18th century Universalist preacher here in America, wrote of having mystical religious experiences that, like Jane Lead, convinced him that hell is for purification and that in the end all will be united with God. And of course, the Unitarians had their mystic branch with the Transcendentalists. Transcendentalist mysticism was not based on a deity, but rather on having an internal experience of being one with the universe that could often be felt in nature. Unitarian Ralph Waldo Emerson called for people to go beyond mere formal religious practice and find ways to engage directly with the awe-inspiring reality. In his essay, Nature, Emerson describes in general terms the kind of mystical experience that he has and he wishes for all people to encounter that does not necessarily relate to a religious practice. He wrote, "Standing on bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air, and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent I. I am nothing. I see all the currents of the universal being circulating through me. I am part or particle of God." These mystical traditions show up in modern Unitarian Universalism through our statements of sources in our purposes and principles. In our gray hymn book, in the first couple of pages, you'll see the statement of principles that we all know. But there's a second part that are the sources of what we believe to be truth and wisdom. And the first source says, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures. Mysticism involves some sense of knowing or joining with ultimate reality, whether that be a God as we understand that word, or a connection with another person, or with nature or with the cosmos. Mysticism or mystical encounters are not dependent, though, upon one's theology or philosophical belief system. What is important in mysticism, as Charles Francis Potter, a mid-20th century humanist Unitarian minister, notes, is the experience itself of being at peace and finding unity and clarity, not any particular theological explanation one may put upon it. Now, when people intentionally pursue a mystical encounter, they often begin by focusing on one or more of the traditional spiritual disciplines: meditation, prayer, fasting, chastity, contemplation, solitude, silence, study, or ecstatic celebration. They do this in hope that these experiences will enable their minds and their spirits to unite in some way with the divine. And it is reported that these practices do sometimes alter a person's perception and enable them to feel a connection with the ultimate reality or with God. Now, I don't know that personally. I'm far too lazy to devote myself to consistent practice of any of these. But what I do know from personal experience and from conversation with people is that mystical experiences do happen. but they come in their own time, usually unbidden. They come to people as Jacob Trapp described in his writing called Return to the Springs. I like to think of mysticism as the art of meeting reality, the art of richer and deeper awareness. It is an experience that comes unbidden. It is not the intellectual conviction that being itself is my being, but rather an ineffable experience of that oneness flooding in to overwhelm the illusions of aloneness and separateness. There are moments when life seems vivid and splendiferous, when a more than mortal splendor breaks in, and when there is a touch of grandeur and glory in just being alive. One of my mystical threshold moments, that threshold moment, that moment like the sound of a meditation chime who rings, trails off into silence. When time disappears into timelessness. This happened one time when I was walking on the University of Kansas campus. As I turned a corner coming around a house and started to walk down a very steep hill that led up to the campus, everything around me and in front of me and over me became golden. It probably was a play of fall, late afternoon sunlight. But for some period of time, a moment, maybe just a few seconds, Chronos time slipped into Kairos, sacred time. And I know that I touched ultimate reality. I felt an awe and a love of creation. And that moment has lived vividly with me now for almost 50 years. We cannot tell when we may cross that threshold moment and a mystical experience may happen, but they are available to all of us. And we do not necessarily need to engage in any special practice. And a mystical experience may not involve vision or voices. Rather, it is more than likely it will be a moment in the midst of some ordinary happening, walking, having a conversation, driving, looking at the stars. An ordinary experience, an ordinary happening when we are engulfed in this feeling of profound wholeness or a sense of being in some greater truth or in union with goodness. And the truth of the matter is that this sacred, mystical moment can happen to any of us if we allow ourselves to be open to it. If we allow ourselves to be open to it and not squelch our natural childlike capacity to see and to take in wonder. Open to all of us if we do not feel we need to let our intellect swoop in and start questioning it or explaining it. The intellect is but one dimension that can affect our take on what is real. But beauty and mystery are also valuable dimensions to know reality. Beauty lets our emotions go free to remember and celebrate the loveliness that has touched our life and our spirit. And accepting that mystery, the unknown, can exist allows us the freedom and to feel that there is nothing wrong when this happens. There is nothing wrong when something happens that we cannot truly understand. I titled this sermon, "The Mystical is the Core of Living," because I think that being open to the realm of the mystical is a vital component of living fully. Now, science is important. Science can teach us all about stuff, about cells and atoms and quantum mechanics and energy and photosynthesis and the stars and so much more. But the mystical can give us a fuller understanding of who we are and how we connect with creation. Can actually do that more than science. As theologian Matthew Fox says, a mystical experience brings us wisdom. It can teach us that we live in a small bubble in the immenseness of mystery, the immenseness of all creation. But it's also interesting that he says a mystical experience can be frustrating. A mystical experience is a touch into the vastness that is beyond our immediate living moment, but it offers no conclusive answers to what it is that we felt. And yet, it leaves us yearning. It leaves us yearning to want to come back and to experience that again. For my year at the University of Kansas, I would make that turn and walk down the hill, hoping that once again everything would be golden and I would touch reality, or the ultimate reality, and it never happened. But I know that it happened, and it is with me, and it is a beautiful moment in my life. Christmas, as I said when I started this sermon, can have a mystical dimension for us. Christmas can be a threshold moment to touch transcendence if we allow ourselves to be open to it. Past the shopping, past the present, past the dinners, past the occasionally strained conversation, perhaps past hurt feelings. Christmas, with all of its potential inherent wonders of joy and love, and the gentle story of a birth and shepherds and a star, whether true or not, that's not important, can be a time to fully feel universal love and awe and connection. If we allow ourselves to quiet our minds and open our spirits, perhaps the Christmas Eve service, or watching our spouse open a present, or observing the grandchildren rip open their gifts, or sitting in a darkened room looking at the lit Christmas tree, or taking a Christmas Day walk, or whatever special event that we may do on Christmas, could be that threshold moment, if we let it be, into the mystical. Now, I'm not saying it will, but it could be. Deep down, each one of us is a mystic when we allow ourselves to be open to the mystery and the wonder of the universe, when we allow ourselves to really sense that we are part of the interdependent web of all existence, and then use that wisdom to energize our spirit. We can know for real. We can know for real that the realm of the divine, the kingdom of God, if you will, is around and within us. So be it. Amen.